I'd like to say, first of all, that because of Renee's vision, she made a decision that many other housing authorities have not made, and it is a decision to invest significantly in the people. Um, we start off this whole process with an assumption that transformation in real estate should be paralleled by transformation in the human estate. And so we start off saying, okay, these folks have potential, and there is an element that I like to call intergenerational transfer. And every single one of us that is the child of somebody or the parent of somebody has benefited from that. We start with a theory that if the intergenerational transfer is flawed, then you figure out where the flaw is and you do an intervention. So we don't start every time thinking that we will turn around the parents, but we start every time thinking that we will work with the families. And this is a whole model that Renee and Egbert and myself have been working at for, what, 15 years? It is clear that the alternative to the question, which is, okay, so leave them where they are, since they're not ready to live in mainstream America, is not the right answer. So the next statement becomes, okay, if that's not, if the status quo is not right, then who's going to come up with the solution? And if not us, then who? And that has been the way that we've approached this, and we have been constantly amazed at how much people accomplish with help. Because every single one of us is the beneficiary of intergenerational transfer.
I'm going to ask just one more question, and then I'd like to take a couple of questions from the audience if there's an interest, before we break for the reception and the most important piece, which is buying the book. But I'm going to ask this of Norman and Carol. I'd like you to jump in too, if you can. And this is admittedly a bit of a softball question, but here's how it goes. But it gets, I think, to the intent of the larger public policy question. Doc, you were the former Board of Education president, and it was policy for the Atlanta Public Schools to place a public school in the middle of each of the public housing projects, often literally in the middle of the development. And I would venture to say that most of the people in this room would consider a neighborhood school, one that you could walk to, an asset. Yet you and every other member of this panel have spent at least the last decade questioning and challenging that strategy. Why?
For the short answer is that if you concentrate poverty in the real estate, you cannot help but concentrate it in the school state. And if you do it, it doesn't work. And my colleague, Aaron Watson, who is here, and I, when we were on the school board and drove around like we did, it was absolutely amazing to find an elementary school nested in these places. There were kids who never saw other kids until the 6th grade. And then, of course, you know my 2 stories. Kimberly Courts, you were just trapped up there in them hills until the 6th grade. And then we brought you down to go to middle school with middle-class kids, and we got surprised that you dropped out. Well, and then in my own neighborhood where I live now and where I've worked a large portion of my professional life, Techwood Clark Howell, we never had a kid with the Freedom Express train sitting right across the street from their home. We never had a kid to go to Georgia Tech. That made absolutely no sense. And Fowler Elementary, nested in the center of that community, think about it, was 100 feet from Alumni House. 100 feet. No kid. We could get kids from Boston, like Eric, faster than we could get kids from across the street. So it was a no-brainer that we had to do something different with those schools. And it was not surprising that the high school graduation rate was down in the low 50s and even lower for black students when we first went to the school board. Thankfully, we have changed that, and in the process, we've learned two things. That kids mixed up do better because they hold each other accountable. And the other thing we've learned that we didn't know in 1992, and I'll always will appreciate Egbert and Renee, they got it right when they decided to give the land to make Centennial Place a curbside school, which if it became a great school, you know, all parents, every one of us in here, are looking for a great school. And if we set it on the curb, the folks will come. And while I have the mic, I'll make one other comment. We've learned now that you have to develop early learning. We didn't know that in '92. And for all of my developer friends, yes, we have to work hard with the schools, but the important thing for you to establish is an early learning center in your community so we can get the kids off to a better beginning. And in the end, Ms. Newell, who stood up, and I'm happy to give this report, only asked for one thing, and it chokes me up all the time. She said, "You gotta promise me that you and President Pat and Eric won't punk us out." And I said, "Miss Newell, what do you mean? We just want a great school for the children in this neighborhood." Well, Miss Newell's grandbaby, who she had in mind, finished Centennial Elementary School this past May and is on her way to Inman Middle, and from Inman Middle to Grady. And everybody in this room knows that's one of the sweetest set of connections if you're going to go to public school. Centennial or Morningside or whatever, Mary Lynn to Inman to Grady. If you do that one, you get free. And if we didn't do anything but get Miss Newell's baby free, that's enough.